Coming up on Chopper's Brexit podcast, isn't it? Third time round. Coming up on Chopper's Brexit podcast.
If Brexit was a box set, 7-season box set like The West Wing, are we in like season 6?
Well, you can always have a, Brexit 2. This time it's personal or something. I don't know, but
let's look at another box set off this.
Yeah, exactly. This is what but it's funny because
leaving on 31st is not the end point. It's the beginning of the talks about fisheries and all the rest of it.
Hello and welcome to Chopper's Brexit podcast. I'm Christopher Hope, the Telegraph's chief political correspondent, coming to you from the Red Lion pub in the heart of Westminster. Well, it's August and you may be listening to this on the beach, but I'm here in the Red Lion pub working hard to bring you the best guests to talk about Brexit for as long as you want. So right now, it's just me and two producers in the Red Lion pub. But some good news, because Chopper's Brexit podcast will be recording a live show on Saturday the 5th of October, and you can come along. We're going to an event called Podcast Live, where we'll be recording a podcast alongside lots of your other favourite shows, talking politics, For the Many, The Week Unwrapped, and many more. So please do come along and say hello. Go to podcastlive.com for tickets and use the code CHOPPER10, all in capitals, to get 10% off your ticket price. Right, on with the show. This week, we've got the first interview with the new Deputy Chairman of the Tory Party and MP for Sutton-in-Cheam, Paul Scully. Plus podcast regular Martin Baxter, founder of polling company Electoral Calculus, will be here with his guide on how to read the runes on all the various polls out there on whether there might be a general election. But first up, Lord Adonis, Andrew Adonis, the former Labour Cabinet Minister. The last time he was on, he had a big debate with Nigel Farage that we called the Rumble in the Red Line, but now he's here all on his own. Andrew Adonis, welcome back to Chopper's Brexit podcast.
It's great to be with you. I'm only sorry I'm not debating with Nigel today.
That was last time, but now you're on your own. You're all to ourselves. And you're wearing a special corduroy jacket with a very fetching Liberty print tie.
I thought this is what was now needed in Brexit Britain.
Yes.
I need to keep up there with Nigel and Co.
You're like a light entertainer.
Actually, well, the only by having striking appearances command attention these days, because nobody seems to pay much attention to rational argument at the moment. So it has to be all on the looks. Which, as you know, are great because I have the name Adonis.
Brexit. It's going to happen, isn't it? Why don't you surrender?
Well, Theresa May, the extraordinary feature of politics in the last 6 months is that Theresa May chose to resign rather than call a referendum. She had a choice all the way through from last November when she agreed her deal with the European Union. She could have, when it was clear it was going to go down in Parliament, and it went down by 250, then 150,
yes.
And then 60 in this long, drawn-out trauma.
MV,
she could at every stage, have called a referendum. And and I think that would have been the right thing, whether you leave or remain, because Parliament was gridlocked. There's a huge national controversy, including amongst people who'd supported Remain, as to whether her deal actually delivered on it. And the right thing, I think, would have been a 3-option referendum. Her deal, Remain, or leave with no deal.
But then a third, no one wins.
Well, no, actually, I think that Remain would have won convincingly in that. But the fact of the matter is, the people could then have decided. What she chose to do, astonishingly, was to resign rather than put this issue to the people.
Yes.
And because she resigned and the issue was unresolved, we've now got the last throw of the Brexit dice, which is Boris Johnson, which I don't think anybody, even 6 months ago, if we'd been having this conversation 6 months ago, I don't think you and I would have thought it likely that Boris was going to be Prime Minister by this summer.
He lacked support in the parliamentary party.
We thought so, and we thought he didn't have a viable policy, and he was all over the place. Because remember, he voted for Theresa May's deal the third time round, having said it was the devil incarnate.
Never publicly discussed that.
He
recounted on Twitter. That's all we know about that vote.
Well, but he did.
It didn't really happen, did it?
But it was a public vote. I mean, it's recorded in Hansard. You and I can read it. So none of us had thought that this was likely. We've now got the last throw of the Brexit dice. He does not have a Brexit strategy at the moment. There's no majority in Parliament for any version of Theresa May's deal, even without the Irish backstop. There's no majority in Parliament for no deal. That we know that there are parliamentary mechanisms for stopping no deal, because there'll be the same mechanisms as were used in March.
They don't need Parliament because
they do.
Because
Parliament will.
Parliament voted to leave by March. By 6 months.
Parliament will pass the necessary legislation through its own procedures to stop no deal. So the law will be changed almost certainly in October. Now, so what we're all sitting here at the moment in the middle of August, those of us who aren't on holiday, is, well, what is his strategy? And the only strategy we can see is a kind of Bismarckian Cummings strategy. Because I've been reading all of these blogs, and I now realise
Dominic Cummings, who's the chief of staff.
Cummings. I now realise that Dominic's great hero is Bismarck. Now, my great hero is Gladstone, who was the great Liberal leader, essentially the guy who invented our modern parliament as a representative assembly that works and all of that. It turns out, it's very interesting when you read the Cummings memos. Cummings worships Bismarck, who founded the Second Reich. Bismarck's slogan was blood and iron.
Yes.
And effectively shock and awe. This is what he was sought to do. He hated the German parliament of his day. And indeed, it's quite clear that Dominic hates the British parliament. So this goes back before the current shenanigans. So what he's seeking to do is to create a new reality by simply asserting, contrary to the working of the British Constitution, that the government appealing to some higher national will, which at the moment we're unaware of because there hasn't been an election.
Well, the will he's talking about is the biggest ever vote in British history in 2016.
But that's obvious nonsense because since then there's been a general election, and the general election, which is also the will of the people, returned to Parliament, which has voted 3 times against the Brexit deal on the table by huge majorities, and has also voted against no deal.
And the manifesto of those elections was both parties fought on leaving.
Yeah, but Parliament is the elected representative of the people in this country. That is how our constitution works. It may be that Dominic wants to completely change the constitution and abolish Parliament, but while we've got Parliament there, it is the sovereign body in the land. So as of now, there is no strategy I can see that makes sense. And I think that despite all the bluster we've got at the moment, we'll go through into October, and then the only 2 options that appear to me to be viable will then present themselves, one of which is an immediate move to a referendum. But if Boris won't do that, and he should do what Theresa May failed to do, which is to call the referendum, if he won't do that, then I think it's almost inevitable now that we'll have a general election.
How about the Queen? Can the Queen stop Brexit?
I absolutely deprecate any bringing of the monarch into this process. The politicians should sort it out.
He's in your party.
I absolutely deprecate bringing the monarch into it. We have established constitutional procedures which keep the monarch out of it for a very good reason, which is the monarch is the symbol of national unity, which at the moment is more important than ever before. And the politicians should sort this out without bringing the Queen into it. And there's no reason why the Queen should be brought into it, because the Fixed Term Parliament Act sets out procedures as to what should happen in the event of the government losing a motion of confidence. They were set out specifically so that the Queen doesn't need to get involved and the Queen shouldn't get involved.
But you've got John McDonnell here saying in Edinburgh this week that he'll be sending Jeremy Corbyn in a cab to Buckingham Palace to say we're taking over. Well, that is dragging the Queen into it, isn't it?
There were 2 different points here. If Boris Johnson loses a motion of confidence and it looks as if there is a parliamentary majority behind Jeremy Corbyn, then the normal working of our constitution is that Jeremy Corbyn would form a government. It doesn't require a cab to be summoned. There'll be an official government car that will convey him. However, what absolutely should not happen is talk about calling on the Queen to dismiss Boris Johnson or anything of that kind. That is for Parliament to resolve. And I am very confident that Parliament will resolve it and that we don't need to politicise the monarchy. And I certainly, from my side of the argument, would strongly oppose any attempt to politicise the Queen.
So is Labour a Remain party now?
Yes. Labour is a Remain party. Our members are overwhelmingly Remain. Our members of Parliament are overwhelmingly Remain. Jeremy is, I should say, 50.1% Remain now. That's where we've got him to, which is a great advance. And I'm absolutely confident that if we have this early election or the referendum, that Labour's policy will be unequivocally in support of Remain.
We haven't heard that clarity from the team around Mr. Corbyn.
That's why you invite me onto your show, because I can give you this great clarity which we need at this time of national crisis.
And how can the Tories beat your friend Nigel Farage?
Well,
because they can do, can't they? If they have a no-deal policy to leave by October 31st, that would be quite a clear-cut election, Remain versus no deal, and Farage can't really sit anywhere on that debate.
Well, can I tell you, I'm genuinely mystified. I've been in politics a long time, and I can usually work out what's going on. I thought what was going to happen when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister is he would immediately sign a pact with Farage, and I thought the pact would be just one Brexit candidate in each seat, and they would come together. And
so Brexit Party fights in the north of England, and then in the south, Brexit Party stands aside, and that's.
Well, I don't know how the pact would be formulated. I thought, because knowing Nigel Farage as I do, I didn't think he'd be bought easily, and I thought he would require there to be 20 or 30 existing Conservative seats so he could go into the House of Commons. But I thought in a matter of days this would happen, and I was noting, because I always man-mark Nigel's movements very closely. I was noting the fact that during the Tory leadership election, Nigel was unaccustomedly silent. He said very, very little. And the things he did say were genuinely warm about Boris Johnson. But far from there being a pact, what happened instead was the appointment of Dominic Cummings, who declared war on Nigel Farage. And this feeling appears to be reciprocated from Nigel's remarks on Dominic. And then the next thing that happened was the by-election in Brecon and Radnor, where Brexit not only stood, but campaigned reasonably hard and got 10% of the vote.
Yes.
Now, the 10% is of crucial importance, because though it's true that the Tories re-established themselves as the main party of leave, the crucial thing is what happened to the associated parties on each side. And this was clearly a Lib Dem target seat, and they were the main Remain party. They won the seat with a majority of 1,000, with a 5% Labour vote.
Yes.
The Tories lost by 1,000 with a 10% Brexit vote.
Yes.
So actually, the Remain side of the argument was much better at mobilising its vote than the Leave side. And that looks to me to be the Achilles heel of Boris Johnson, unless he can sort it out in the next month or two.
Well, let's wait and see. You are a brilliant mind on transport. You're concerned about the Isle of Wight ferries, I note from Twitter.
They're terrible.
But let's put that to one side. That's not a Brexit issue, but you're concerned about it. Isn't Brexit slightly taking over your life in a bad way? I mean, is it driving you mad?
No is the answer.
It's driving some people mad. People are getting quite obsessed about it.
Those who know me know that I don't do big issues by halves. The reason I brought about big change in the education system and the transport system is I didn't stop. Every day I was setting up new academies. I was personally visiting failing schools up and down the country and saying, we can't put up with this any longer.
You've got an amazing history of public service. But this is devoting all of your life now.
But this is, I see it as the latest act of public service. I believe, obviously people disagree, but I believe that Brexit would be the worst mistake we make as a country in a generation. I think it will impoverish us as a country. It will deny the next generation the opportunities that they deserve to be able to forge careers and relationships across Europe, and I think it will weaken Britain's influence in the world. So I feel a duty to speak up for it, and because I don't do things by halves, I basically have made this my big issue. What happens now? It is true that when you and I first did our first interview, I thought it was going to be a matter of months. We all thought it. I thought it would all be resolved by last summer.
You were an early adopter of this.
And part of the reason I came out is I thought we can finish off this ludicrous proposition called Brexit quite quickly. And I thought that by last summer it would be over. And then it went into the autumn and then the new year, and then we got the extension of Article 50 in March. And it looks as if now we could have another 6 months to a year of it. But I am not giving up, because this is so important to the country. And I know when I talk to my kids and their generation that if we do make this big national mistake of leaving, it's not going to be final. What will happen is the next generation will revisit it, just as the generation above us took us into the EU after the huge mistake of not going in at the beginning of the 1940s.
You're never going to start fighting this battle?
Well, the battle will continue to be fought. I'm not sure that I will. I think I might go on and start sorting out the Isle of Wight ferry.
Yes.
But the next generation will revisit this. And I'm absolutely convinced that if we make the mistake of leaving this year or next year the EU, it's only a matter of time before a new generation of politicians, probably Conservative and Labour, I don't think it'd be a matter of parties, seek to take us back in again. And then the big issue is how traumatic is the negotiation going to be with our French and German friends to enable us to go in? Because remember when we made this mistake the first time round, remember when we made this mistake the first time round, de Gaulle vetoed us twice and delayed us for 10 years. And though I love France dearly, they are out to steal our lunch when it comes to the City of London and a lot of our big industries. And I don't think it's going to be easy for us to re-enter this huge European market, which we have. So let's not make the mistake.
Andrew, now you're saying re-enter.
No, but so let's not make the mistake first time round, so that the next generation haven't got to go through this trauma.
Okay, Andrew Adonis, it's great to have you in your summary jacket.
And next time I want to be debating Nigel.
We'll ask him for you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now stay with us. In just a moment, the new Deputy Chairman of the Tory Party and MP for Sutton-in-Cheam, Paul Scully, is making his debut on Chopper's Brexit podcast. We'll be back right after this.
Hello, Chopper listeners. I'm Peter Foster, the Telegraph's Europe editor, and I wanted to let you know about another way you can stay up to date with Brexit on those long, lonely days when you're all caught up on Chopper's Brexit podcast. It's my Brexit Bulletin newsletter. Every weekday, I compile the best news and analysis from the Telegraph's Brexit team, including my esteemed colleagues Asa Bennett in London and James Crisp in Brussels. I can't predict how this unstable period will end, but I can arm you with the facts in your inbox at 5 p.m. sharp, Monday to Friday. Just search Telegraph Brexit Bulletin or click on the link in the podcast show notes.
Right, back in the Red Lion pub, with me now is Paul Scully, Deputy Chairman of the Tory Party. I'm joined now by Paul Scully, the new Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. Paul, welcome to Chopper's Brexit podcast.
Good to join you.
Are you familiar with these green walls, the beer-flecked walls, the Red Lion
I
pub?
have been in the Red Lion once or twice over the years. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And you're back here now. We're having a coffee, not a drink, aren't we, of
Exactly,
course?
yeah. No, very good.
So you've been made Deputy Chairman. Why are you Deputy Chairman?
Well, I think over the years I was Vice Chairman before, looking after London, and hopefully the party's appreciated what I do there. Now it's just a sort of wider role, so still doing the London stuff, looking at doing outreach stuff as well, but also campaigning on a national scale as well. So important to get the party, really connecting with everything.
Are you election ready?
We're always election ready. I think one of the things that...
Like the SES, they're always
exactly.
Always ready to do something.
What you guys love are elections, whether it's leadership elections or general elections. And
we don't love it.
We've done one. We've done the leadership. Now you're on to the general election range. But, a lot of the stuff that we've been doing is that you guys have been speculating on, whether it's the increased funding for the NHS, whether it's the 20,000 new policemen, the levelling up of schools, and all of these kind of things. That's a sign of good governance. I think that's the energetic, positive start that we've had, that hopefully, again...
The rocket boosters that Boris is giving to the government.
It's important that we do that. And, I think it seems to be that the way, if you're looking at the reports and the response around the country, that I think people are responding to an energetic approach to government.
Party feel lifted and energised by the last 8 weeks?
The party's largely feeling pretty good about itself. And so it's important that we carry on that momentum and get through so that we can respect the referendum and leave the EU on October 30th.
I only ask because everyone's saying that's the only solution to unpicking the Brexit problem at the moment. I mean, can you see a different way through?
I just don't believe we need an election before October the 31st. Boris has been pretty clear about that as well. That we will leave. I mean, we've been really resolute about
changing Parliament.
Look, so what you've got to do, the parliamentary arithmetic is clearly difficult, but nonetheless, first of all, we need the EU to be more flexible. We can't have the anti-democratic backstop that has been that's failed in vote 3 times. We can't be perpetual rule takers as a country, and so we need to get the EU to show that flexibility. And then if we don't, if there's something stopping us by October the 31st, it'll be because the EU hasn't wanted to negotiate or the Labour Party have failed to vote for a deal. But we've been really resolute that we are going to respect the referendum. We are going to leave on October the 31st, come what may.
Is Dominic Cummings the best thing to happen to Brexit since the last thing?
Look, Dominic Cummings...
Setting aside Boris Johnson, but Dominic Cummings appears to be the person giving the energy to this behind Brexit now.
Well, you know what? One of the great things about Boris, and I saw it in London, I see it again now, is he's really good at putting teams together. And Dominic is an integral part of that team, but he's one member of the energy, the positive, the optimism. But there's lots of people involved in that, not least Boris himself.
He's not elected, though, is he? Do you worry about too much focus on an unelected official?
Well, that's you guys putting the focus on him. I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people are, trying to pick something that's not necessarily there. What we want is a whole vibrant team in Downing Street, a whole vibrant team in CCHQ and across the country that's delivering the referendum and delivering on the domestic agenda as well.
You don't want an election, and Boris Johnson said he didn't want an election at all those different meetings he went to with the party members. But if you're forced to have one because the government collapses, there's no confidence vote, there will be an election, won't there?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we'll see what happens, but because the timing is really tight on that and in exactly how you might make that happen. But we're just focused on October the 31st, and then we'll see what happens after that. But we just got to get back to this domestic agenda. That's what people want us to do. They don't. We have elections anyway. We've got, which is why another role for me in CCHQ. We've got the London elections next year, PCC elections, and all these sort of things. People are fed up with just keep going back and asking the same questions. We've had a referendum in 2016. Let's just get on and get it done.
Well, when will the chaos end, do you think?
Well, I think, we're starting to find a...
We're getting near the end point, are we?
Yeah, look, if you look at the difference between in the last couple of weeks compared to what was happening before the summer recess, we've got a greater sense of collective responsibility now within the cabinet. We've got a greater sense of direction. We've got a greater sense of energy. And I think people are starting to find that things are coming together, that there is a real focus on not just Brexit, but also on the domestic agenda, the health service, policing and education, levelling up in education.
If Brexit was a box set, 7-season box set like The West Wing, are we in like season 6?
Well, you can always have a Brexit 2. This time it's personal or something. I don't know. But
There could be another box set after this.
Yeah, exactly.
Goodness
this
gracious.
is what But it's funny
because leaving on 31st is not the end point. It's the beginning of the talks about fisheries and all the rest of it.
I was going on about this for some time now. That for those that are already bored of Brexit, we're only halfway through because the frustrating thing for me is that we're still talking about whether we leave, not how we leave. And now that's what I'm most excited about the Boris government is we're really focusing on the how we leave and just
is the uncertainty more damaging than a no deal Brexit? Do you think?
I think the uncertainty is really damaging, and this
is more damaging than no deal because that's what some people told me.
In many ways, it is absolutely, and this is when you get people that are talking about second referendum, people that are talking about general elections. All they're actually doing is that they're trying to unpick the referendum in the first place, and they're just trying to perpetuate uncertainty, which business absolutely wants, and people want, EU citizens want, and just people in this country want a sense of direction. So many people said, you know what, I voted Remain, but I'm a Democrat. And I just want to get this done.
How is Boris Johnson better than Theresa May as leader?
I think it's the whole sense of government that I think has changed. So I'm not going to compare leadership in terms of personalities, but what we've seen, as I say, what he's done is brought in a greater sense of focus. Theresa May had a really difficult job to do, impossible circumstances, trying to do something that satisfied everybody. That clearly didn't work. But Boris
Brexit is a state where you're in or you're out, aren't you? That's the point about Brexit.
Yeah, exactly. I voted to leave for any number of different reasons. I do get a bit sicker when everyone's telling me why I voted to leave. But it was leave and remain on the ballot paper, 2 words, and leave 1. And so that's what we've got to do: respect the referendum and get on and leave by October the 31st.
Just on Islamophobia, is that a problem in the Tory party, or is it a confected issue by critics of the party?
I think it's something that again, some people with an agenda are trying to push. But we have a really firm complaints procedure, and it's something that we'll have zero tolerance over. And so there is an independent process that if anybody is making anything that's anti-Muslim comments or anything like that, we will look at it and stamp it down on it really quickly. I was at an event with the Ahmadiyya community just last weekend. I spoke to 30,000 of them in their national convention, and I had absolute positive vibes. We've got Eid al-Fitr coming up, and there'll be a series of events there that Conservatives will be at, and we always continue to reach out and speak to the whole of the
Do you see equivalence between the anti-Semitism issue in Labour with this issue in the Tory party?
I think there are people trying to bring that equivalence. But I just don't think that's the case, frankly. I think, you can see the anti-Semitism really deeply ingrained across the Labour Party. You can see the response of the entire Jewish community to how they see a failure right from the top through to the grassroots, not being stamped out at the top. Whereas I think, if there are
cases in your party,
if there are people in our party or some people claiming to be members or affiliating with the Conservative Party, we'll of course stamp that out because we have zero tolerance to anything that's just damaging.
How many cases are you looking at a week?
Again, that's not something, to be fair, I've been involved in, so I couldn't tell you the figures.
And just Paul, first finally, have you got a manifesto ready for the election? Has that been worked on?
Well, we're always working on policy, but you can see the fundamental things. We're talking about, apart from leaving
policing,
the EU,
health,
it's the 20,000 policing, which is really important in London.
Core things.
For me in London, it's levelling up the funding of schools. It's making sure people can feel the benefits of the increased funding in the NHS at the front line. And that's going to be the fundamentals.
How about a new Royal Yacht Britannia to take Britain out of the EU with a new trading link to the rest of the world?
Well, crikey, that's not even something I've thought about. But, actually, it is important that we do the Global Britain stuff. I've been the Prime Minister's trade envoy to Thailand, Brunei and Burma, and they are really itching to have greater market access. The investment that's actually been delayed because of the uncertainty that we talked about is waiting to come in, and so it's important that we do the Global Britain so we've got the strong economy that can actually pay for all the other stuff that we've just been talking about.
Paul Scully, it's great to have you on. A guy voted Leave in 2016 as well, and high up now in the Tory party. Thanks for coming on, and do come on again.
Pleasure, absolutely, I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Now, Paul Scully there saying why he doesn't want an election before October 31st. Not another one, would say Brenda from Bristol. And Brenda's right, but the polls say we are on course for an election. So with me now is Martin Baxter, the founder of Electoral Calculus, a referee of the best polling out there. Martin's here to tell us why he thinks an election could be on the cards and who might win it. Martin, welcome back to Chopper's Brexit podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be back.
Our regular pollster, our regular expert. So, we're talking about an election all the time now in politics. If there was an election now, will the Tories win?
Well, my figures show that the Conservatives have bounced back and they're now very close to...
Under Boris,
very close to an overall majority, predicted to win 317 seats.
Right.
Now, they need, for a majority, a lead over Labour of about 6%, and they're just short of that at the moment. But on average. But interestingly, some pollsters are showing them much higher than other pollsters.
Yes, well, we'll come on to that. But currently the lead is around 5%. So they are pushing towards the point where, because they'll be looking at these numbers in central office, and they'll know if they get above 6%, 7%. So if we see a Tory leader of that ilk, they'll be thinking about an election, won't they?
Exactly, or at least it'll be safer. So at the moment, they've got a lead of 5% and predicted number of seats 317. So that's 9 seats short of the 326 you need for an overall majority. So that's roughly what Theresa May got at the last election. But so in that sense, it's a standstill. But it's much better than where they were a few months ago.
Yes, quite. Now you've got some rules of thumb for our listeners on how to work out. How to read the rooms in these polls.
I think anyone can become an elections expert. All we need is 3 rules, which I call the rules of 6, 9, and 8. So let me take you through them. So the key number that matters right now at the moment is the lead between the Conservatives and Labour. So, and you need, for a majority, you need that to be 6%.
Right.
Really, either way, either Conservatives 6% ahead of Labour or the reverse. But that, of course, gets you a majority of 1. Mm-hmm. The next number, 9, is the number you need to have a convincing majority, a healthy majority that will let you get a lot of legislation through. Because if you have a 9% lead, that would be a majority of about 50 seats or more. So it's going quite well. So 6 to get in the door of number 10, but 9 to get a usable majority.
Yes.
Yeah. And the third number, which is very useful for understanding the uncertainties around polls and the difference that a little swing can make, is what I call the seat delta.
Right.
Okay, I don't want to blind you with science, but let me see if I can say this. This is the number of seats more that you get if there's a 1% increase in that Conservative Labour lead. So if it goes up from, say, 5% to 6%, that's an increase of 1, you get 8 more seats, or on average, roughly.
Right.
And if it goes up another 1, you get another 8, and so on as it goes.
So these 3 rules of thumb are how we should be reading the polls over the next few months.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this is different from how it was a little bit earlier. So just after the EU elections, it was more like a 4-party system, and there was different rules of thumb, and it was more complicated. But now things are settling back down. It's not quite the 2-party system, but I call it 2 and 2 halves. We've got 2 big parties, and then the Brexit and the Lib Dems are noticeably further behind now than they were.
I'm going to say to you, Theresa May, pre-2017, now she was well ahead in the polls of Labour, wasn't she, when she called the election, and it all went wrong. So this is assuming they have a good election campaign, isn't it? These
yes, of course. And the thing about the seat delta, of course, is that there might be a bit of polling error, or that there could be swings in the campaign. And when it is so close, a few percent, say a 3% swing from Labour to Conservatives or the other way, that's a 6% change in the lead. Yeah. That's about 50 seats. Yeah. And 50 seats is easily the difference between success and failure.
And now in Electoral Calculus, you take a view of all the pollsters across the piece. You're like a referee of polling, aren't you? And you've found some interesting, different way pollsters are forecasting a Tory victory, aren't you?
Yes. Normally we take an average of the latest poll from each pollster. So each pollster counts
Ipsos Mori, YouGov, Comres, Opinion, the rest of them.
Delta Poll, everybody. Yes. Okay. Everyone accredited. And that gives you a good idea of the average. But what we've been seeing recently, and we saw this at the EU elections as well, is that there's 2 groups of pollsters. There's one group of pollsters who are the majority, who think the Conservative lead over Labour is moderate. And there's another group who think it's much larger. The second group is mostly YouGov, who've done a lot of polling, and Ipsos Mori. And the first group is really everybody else.
Yes.
Now, if we run those separately, just for kind of fun, for the podcast, I did a little poll of polls of the first type of pollster and a poll of polls of the second.
Okay.
And we get very different answers. With the first type, we actually get the ones who think the lead is fairly small. The Conservatives are the largest party on 296 seats, but well short of an overall majority.
So that's Opinion, Delta Poll and Comres, right?
That's actually, yeah, exactly. But Labour and the Lib Dems and the SNP could have a progressive alliance that had a majority of 14. So that, if those pollsters are right, and there was an election tomorrow, you could have a Jeremy Corbyn government with a majority of 14,
right?
Coalition. On the other hand, if YouGov and Ipsos Mori are right, then the Conservatives would have 359 seats, and Boris Johnson would be returned with a healthy majority of 68.
It's a big swing of 64.
63, yeah. Which makes sense because the other pollsters are seeing a lead of 2%,
was YouGov and Co seeing a lead of 10%. So that's an 8% difference in the lead. And it goes back to my seat delta, 88 to 64.
Okay, I'm going to ask you who's right.
Well, okay, the honest answer, Chris, is we don't know. But if we look back at the EU elections, there was a very similar behaviour. That YouGov showed a much weaker position for Labour than the other pollsters, and YouGov were right.
Okay.
So you wouldn't want to write off YouGov and say that they're obviously wrong. I see that there's people on Twitter who go, well, YouGov, were founded by some people with conservative leanings, and it's just biased.
Might mean they know the audience better.
Well, there's they do have some advantages running their own panel, so they have some technical advantages. So we'll have to see. Equally, at the EU elections, they got the Brexit Party a little bit wrong there, so they didn't get everything right. But on the whole, they were more accurate than the other pollsters. So
you watch YouGov as the best of the bunch, do you?
Well, I think I wouldn't want to disregard them.
No.
So that's what we're going to see. But equally, if you were the Prime Minister or somebody advising the Prime Minister, it's a hard decision about who do you believe?
And of course, it can all go wrong in a 6-week election campaign. That's in 2017.
Or it could go right. I mean, we saw that in that election campaign in 2017. The polls were right, I believe, at the beginning. The Conservatives did have a big lead. Yeah. And as it went on and Theresa May talked and talked,
it fell away.
You saw it fall away week by week.
So, Chris, finally, the big question, forget the election, although that's a big question, the Brexit. Now, what are the odds looking like on leaving October 31st?
Okay. So
Help us out, Martin.
Righty-ho. So we get the odds from Betfair Exchange, where people, political punters can...
so it's where money's going.
Yeah, so we can weigh the extent of the money. We're not counting votes, we're counting money. And this has changed quite a lot recently since Boris Johnson got in, and there's been more announcements and talk of no deal. So no deal exit is now the most likely outcome. There's only 40%, still less than half. So 2 chances in 5.
Okay.
5 to 2 against, as the bookies say. So 40% chance of no deal.
Yes.
Around about 25% chance of an agreed deal with the EU. But together that still is only about 60-odd%. So it's less than 2/3 chance that we leave on time, say the punters.
Right.
If you disagree, you can go and make a bet.
Yes.
There's about a quarter chance that Article 50 gets revoked. So the betters,
24%.
Yep. And then a 14% chance of something else, which would probably be an extension. So it's still open, but before it was a bit more even, and just in the last couple of weeks, no deal has gone up a bit.
So all the hyperventilating about no deal from the government is kind of working now where the money's going.
Yes, exactly. The other thing, one last fact, is that the punters think a 60% chance of a general election this year. It's the most likely thing to happen.
You heard it here first. And of course, Martin will put your analysis, we'll put a link to that in the show notes to our podcast. Martin, thanks again.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Thank you. And thanks to all my guests this week, Paul Scully, Andrew Adonis, and of course, Martin Baxter. Thanks to the podcast producers, Theo Luludis and Elliot Lampitt, and this week's photographer, Eddie Mulholland. And don't forget, you can get access to Telegraph's brilliant news, comment and analysis completely free of charge for 30 days at telegraph.co.uk/chopper. If you want to get in touch, do tweet us at Brexit Broadcast or email us choppersbrexitpodcast@telegraph.co.uk. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please do leave us a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. That really helps other people find the show. I don't know why, but it does. Always buy a copy of The Telegraph. It's brilliant. Until next time, cheerio!